Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I find myself experiencing the mind state of anticipation as we see a few folks here, and anticipating the return of physical presence with one another after a long period of Zoom presence, or whatever you would call it. So fortunately, we have that ability. It's better than nothing, certainly. And I'm grateful that we have it, and I'm even more grateful that we have each other in our physical bodies. And just imagine if you would enter with me into a little thought experiment. That just imagine that a long time ago there was a comet hit the Earth and spread some space germs all around the planet and made human beings very sick. The only problem was that every human being was sick, so therefore they didn't even notice that they were sick, because it was called normal. And this disease, this unrecognized disease, manifests itself as a state of chronic dissatisfaction. That human beings are constantly looking for something to fulfill them. And it can't be done. And it's a very painful disease. But once again, since everyone has it, no one calls it a disease. It's called normality. It's called human life. But once upon a time, there was a man that was a genius who had a deep insight into the realization that humanity was sick, was ill. And he called it a bad case of the dukkha's. Dukkha being a Sanskrit word for unsatisfying, suffering, stress, what we might call today the human condition, what today we call normal in our modern world, postmodern world, whatever this world is. And his genius was so deep that he saw not only that we all had a disease, but he saw the cause and the cure for it. And he even wrote us a prescription for recovery from dukkha, from dissatisfaction, from chronic dissatisfaction. And that prescription we're going to talk about today, it's known as the Eightfold Path. It's part of the Buddha's teaching. He left a huge body of teachings. The Buddha was the man that was the genius that I'm referring to. And he saw that there was a cause and a cure to the illness of chronic dissatisfaction. And his genius was such that he recognized that the dissatisfaction had nothing to do with the conditions of our life. which is part of the disease that we suffer, the disease of illusion, delusion, believing that our dissatisfaction is caused by somebody or something beyond us, outside of us. And the beautiful thing is that the Buddha discovered that when one finds the cure to this delusion, this chronic dissatisfaction, then you can be satisfied no matter what the conditions of one's life. That's quite radical and seemingly fantastic for many folks, because we have become so used to and so conditioned to believe that if only we had this, if only we had that, if only we could get rid of this or that. And sometimes the thing we're trying to get rid of is the very same thing that we wanted for so long as the answer to our happiness. I had a friend that he wanted for so long to have a sailboat. He saved up his money and after several years bought a beautiful sailboat. He used it for maybe 2 or 3 summers, then decided to sell it. He couldn't get rid of it. He found that it cost more money to maintain it than it was worth. And so that's the case writ large for humanity. Every solution to a problem turns out to be another problem 10 or 20, 50 years later. I remember as a kid when DDT was touted as the answer to all our agricultural problems and all of the mosquito problems. And of course, today it's not seen as a solution, it's seen as the problem itself. Far worse than the mosquitoes. So we're talking about a radical cure. And that radical cure is in what's called the Eightfold Path. We've just finished a 4-day retreat where we explored the Eightfold Path and its various components. And so I'd like to kind of summarize that retreat experience in our presentation today and hopefully give you the essence of the Eightfold Path, even though we don't have 4 days to unpack it. We have more like 10 minutes to do so. We could think of the Eightfold Path as how we can overcome the human condition of chronic dissatisfaction. And to state it positively, to be perfectly satisfied with life as it is in each moment. So this Eightfold Path could be understood to have 3 components, 3 categories, if you will. The first 2 stages or steps of the Eightfold Path are called the wisdom stages, bhavana, not bhavana, prajna in Sanskrit. And the wisdom category consists of right understanding or wise understanding or whatever you want to call it, skillful understanding. And it's an understanding into, a deep understanding into the nature of unhappiness, its cause, and its cure. That unhappiness is caused by wanting, craving, demanding that something be different than what it is. This is not enough. This is too much. This is too much and yet not enough. Sounds like a book title, doesn't it? So we explore that experience of dissatisfaction, that dukkha. And that's challenging because we are so conditioned in our culture to pretend it's not there. And that's perhaps the biggest symptom of this disease of dukkha, the delusion that if only I had another sailboat, or only if I could get rid of my sailboat, or whatever it is. You can substitute anything in there for sailboat. Husband, wife, kids, cars, physical ailments, whatever it might be. Recognizing that it's the very demand that life be different than it is. That's the problem. There's nothing wrong with solving problems externally. There's nothing wrong with fixing things. But that's very, very temporary. It's like having a brain tumor and then taking an aspirin. You know, it may make the pain go away, but it doesn't even address the original issue. And that's how we live. Sometimes we take sugar-coated pills, make them taste good, make us feel good temporarily. And pretty soon we need 2 pills, and then more and more and more, you see. So, deep insight into the cause and the cure of dukkha. And then the second step in prajna, or wisdom category, is that of right motivation, or wise motivation. And that is that we do the practice in order to be free from dukkha, to be totally free. We don't do the practice just for a temporary fix. We don't do the practice to try to change anything other than our own understanding. Nothing needs to change except the way we see things. And once again, that doesn't mean that it's not helpful to sell a car or buy a car or take a pill if you have a headache. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's not the answer. We're just, as they say, rearranging the furniture on the deck of the Titanic. So, right motivation is a deep desire to find the truth of who we are. And that truth is the cure to our chronic dissatisfaction. The second category consists of 3 different steps. Second category is the willingness to live in this world in a way that harms no other being. In that category, called sila, or ethics, basically has the umbrella teaching of do no harm. And there's three basic categories that the Buddha identified. Do no harm through speech. That's a big one today. I mean, I think maybe it always was, but especially today. And speech doesn't mean just vocal speech. You know, it can mean anything from texting to posting things on Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. Communication. Right communication. Communication that is honest and kind. And that, unfortunately, is becoming more and more rare today. Right livelihood. Finding a livelihood that supports awakening, supports health and wholeness. Recognizing that so much of what we do is connected with other parts of our planet that are part of the illness, so to speak. I remember talking to a young man beginning to practice this meditation practice. And he was telling me that he was an investment broker in New York City, and he made oodles of money. But he was having a nagging dissatisfaction in a sense that something was not quite right, because he knew he had to decide between serving his clients, and sometimes that meant offering investments in companies that he knew was harmful, was harming the planet ecologically, or that was employing sweatshop labor. And he had this sense of something's not quite right. So right livelihood, you know, doing for a living that which supports life, that which supports awakening. And the third category is right conduct, just living in a way that harms no other beings. That is a practice in itself. Sila. We can do that anytime. Hopefully we do it all the time. So we cultivate wisdom, and at the same time we live our life wisely and compassionately. And then the third category is that of bhavana or meditation. And that's what we typically connect with Buddhism and Buddhist practices. We think of someone sitting on, you know, in a Buddha-like position, meditating. Meditation consists of calming the mind through the ability to concentrate on a particular object. That object is often the breath. As we learn to keep the awareness connected to the breath, moment by moment by moment. And it takes some effort to do that. And that's part of the bhavana, is right effort. It takes right effort, wise effort, to strengthen our faculty of attention. Most of us have a very weak faculty of attention. In fact, we are cultivating in our culture quite the opposite. A culture of distraction, constant distraction. So being able to bring the awareness and hold the awareness on the breath or on a mantra, chanting, or a candle flame, a visual image, whatever it might be, but holding the mind to a single point, like a laser beam. That takes practice, right effort. And the other element in bhavana, meditation, is mindfulness. Mindfulness practice is the ability to be awake in each and every moment, regardless of what the content of that moment is. So if we can stay awake when we're feeling pain, stay present to the pain. If we can stay present to the pleasure. If we can stay present to neutrality. To boredom. Sometimes that's more difficult than pain for some people. To stay present to whatever experience is here in the body, in the mind. So in this moment, I invite you just to experience your body. To experience, observe the mind, and see if you can simply be aware of it in much the same way that the camera is simply recording whatever image it's focused on. The camera is not trying to control or change anything. And so mindfulness is much the same way, just focusing on this moment, whatever the moment contains, and holding this moment as being sacred. And so meditation, cultivating wisdom, cultivating compassion through ethical behavior, non-harming. In a nutshell, that's the prescription for awakening. Simple though it may be, one can spend a lifetime and still not reach the full depth of its teaching and power and wisdom. So I invite you to let yourself recognize when you get a case of the dukkha's, and to see that that's what it is, and to apply the prescription of the Eightfold Path. So thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing the Dharma with us.